The mining station Epsilon 7 trembled as another cargo transport docked, sending vibrations through the metal corridors that made Sarah Chen's coffee slosh in her mug. She pressed her face against the observation deck's reinforced viewport, watching the newest arrivals disembark from their ships. Most were familiar species, the crystalline Vorthak with their glittering skin, the graceful Selenites floating in their environmental suits, and the insectoid Chitauri clicking their way across the landing bay. Then she saw him. The creature that emerged from the largest transport ship stood nearly 12 feet tall, his massive frame covered in what looked like natural armor plating. His skin was a deep emerald green with darker patches along his shoulders and arms, and when he turned his head, Sarah caught sight of 4 glowing amber eyes arranged in pairs on either side of his skull. 2 curved horns protruded from his forehead, and his jaw was filled with teeth that could easily crush steel. The other beings on the landing platform gave him an extremely wide berth. Even the usually fearless Chitauri warriors, known throughout the galaxy for their combat prowess, stepped aside when he approached. Dock workers dropped their equipment and fled to safe distances. The entire landing bay seemed to hold its breath as the giant alien moved through the space. Sarah had been working on Epsilon 7 for 3 years as a xenobiologist, studying the various alien species that came through the mining station. She had encountered hundreds of different beings, from the peaceful herbivorous glimmerwings to the notoriously aggressive razor clans. But she had never seen anything like this creature, and more importantly, she had never seen other aliens react with such obvious terror. Her supervisor, Dr. Marcus Webb, appeared beside her at the viewport, his face pale as he watched the scene below. "That's a Gorvani warrior," he whispered, his voice barely audible. "I've only seen them in classified military reports. They're from the Outer Rim territories beyond the neutral zone." Sarah studied the alien more carefully. Despite his intimidating appearance, something about his movement struck her as odd. He wasn't strutting or displaying aggressive behavior like most warrior species did when they wanted to establish dominance. Instead, he moved with careful, deliberate steps, almost as if he was trying to minimize his impact on his surroundings. When a small maintenance robot rolled too close to his feet, he stepped carefully around it rather than simply crushing it or kicking it aside. "What's he doing here?" Sarah asked, unable to tear her eyes away from the fascinating creature. Dr. Webb consulted his tablet, scrolling through the arrival manifests. According to this, he's listed as a freelance mining consultant. Name's Thrakvar. He's supposed to be here for the deep core extraction project in Sector 12. The Sector 12 project was Epsilon 7's most ambitious undertaking, an attempt to extract rare crystalline deposits from the planet's core using advanced drilling technology. The work was dangerous, requiring someone with extensive knowledge of geological formations and mining techniques in extreme conditions. If this Gorvani warrior was qualified for such specialized work, he had to be incredibly intelligent, not just physically powerful. As Sarah watched, she noticed something else unusual. The Gorvani's equipment was carefully organized and well-maintained. His tools were arranged with precision on his utility belt, and his environmental suit, while massive, showed signs of careful modification and improvement. This wasn't the gear of a mindless brute. It was the equipment of a skilled professional who took pride in his work. The crowd of aliens continued to avoid him as he made his way toward the station's main entrance. Sarah could see the fear in their eyes, the way they whispered among themselves and pointed in his direction. Some of the younger beings actually ran away when he looked in their direction. The isolation was complete and absolute. Something about the situation bothered Sarah deeply. She had spent her career studying alien behavior and social dynamics, and she recognized the signs of prejudice and discrimination when she saw them. The other beings weren't avoiding Thrakvar because of anything he had actually done. They were avoiding him purely because of what he was, because of the reputation his species had earned. But Sarah had also learned that reputations could be misleading. Some of the most gentle beings she had ever met belonged to species known for their warrior cultures, while some of the most dangerous creatures she had encountered came from supposedly peaceful civilizations. Judging an individual based solely on their species was not just wrong, it was scientifically unsound. Dr. Webb tugged at her sleeve. "Come on, Sarah, we should get back to the lab. The quarterly reports need to be finished by tomorrow." But Sarah didn't move from the viewport. She continued watching as Thrakvar approached the station's security checkpoint. The guards, a pair of Vorthak crystalloids, visibly flinched when he presented his identification. One of them actually backed away so far that he bumped into the wall behind him. The whole process took much longer than it should have, as the guards seemed reluctant to get close enough to scan his credentials properly. Throughout the entire ordeal, Thrakvar remained patient and polite. He didn't raise his voice, didn't make threatening gestures, and didn't show any signs of irritation despite the obvious discrimination he was facing. He simply stood there quietly, waiting for the guards to overcome their fear and do their jobs. That was the moment Sarah made her decision. She had spent her entire career studying aliens, learning about their cultures and behaviors, building bridges between different species. If this Gorvani warrior was going to be working on Epsilon 7 for the foreseeable future, someone needed to make an effort to understand him. Someone needed to look past the frightening exterior and see the individual underneath. And apparently, that someone was going to be her. "I'll catch up with you later." "Marcus," she said, heading for the exit. "There's something I need to do first." Dr. Webb called after her, warning her about the dangers of approaching an unknown alien, especially one from a warrior species. But Sarah had already made up her mind. She had never backed down from a scientific challenge before, and she wasn't about to start now. As she made her way through the station's corridors toward the main entrance, Sarah felt her heart racing with a mixture of excitement and nervousness. She was about to become the first being on Epsilon 7 to voluntarily approach the Gorvani warrior, and she had no idea how he would react to her presence. Sarah found Thrakvar standing alone in the station's main corridor, studying a holographic map of the mining complex. His massive frame blocked most of the hallway, forcing other beings to squeeze past him along the walls. None of them made eye contact, and most hurried by as quickly as possible. The Gorvani warrior seemed absorbed in his work, occasionally making notes on a tablet that looked comically small in his enormous hands. Taking a deep breath, Sarah approached from the front so he could see her coming. She didn't want to startle him. Startling a 12-foot-tall warrior seemed like a poor life choice. When she was about 10 feet away, all four of his amber eyes focused on her. Up close, she could see that his eyes weren't just glowing. They had an intelligence and depth that surprised her. "Excuse me," Sarah said, proud that her voice came out steady despite her racing heart. "Are you Thrakvar? I'm Dr. Sarah Chen, xenobiologist. I wanted to welcome you to Epsilon 7. For a long moment, Thrakvar said nothing. He simply stared at her with those four luminous eyes, his expression unreadable. Sarah began to wonder if she had made a terrible mistake. Maybe Gorvani warriors didn't appreciate being approached by strangers. Maybe she had just committed some sort of cultural offense that would result in her becoming a very small stain on the corridor floor. Then, to her amazement, Thrakvar's fearsome features shifted into what she could only describe as surprise. His voice, when he finally spoke, was a deep rumble that she felt as much as heard, but his words were carefully chosen and surprisingly gentle. "You are not afraid," he said. And it wasn't a question. It was a statement filled with wonder, as if he was observing a phenomenon he had never encountered before. "Most beings run when they see me. Even the warriors of other species cross to the opposite side of passages when I approach." Sarah tilted her head, studying his face. "Should I be afraid? Have you given me a reason to be?" Thrakvar's four eyes blinked in sequence, a gesture that somehow conveyed deep thought. "My people have a reputation for violence. We are known throughout the galaxy as destroyers, as conquerors who show no mercy to our enemies. When others see me, they see only death and destruction. But that's not what I see," Sarah replied honestly. "I see someone who stepped carefully around a maintenance robot instead of destroying it. Someone who waited patiently while nervous security guards took twice as long as necessary to process his credentials. Someone who's studying mining schematics with the focus of a dedicated professional." Something remarkable happened then. Thrakvar's expression shifted again, and Sarah realized he was smiling. It was a terrifying sight, all those sharp teeth on display, but it was unmistakably a genuine smile of gratitude and surprise. "You observe well. Dr. Chen, I am indeed here as a mining consultant, specializing in deep core extraction in hostile environments. My species may be known for warfare, but we are also excellent engineers and geologists. Our homeworld requires us to dig deep beneath the surface to survive, so we have developed advanced techniques over thousands of years. Sarah found herself relaxing as they talked. Despite his intimidating appearance, Throckvar spoke with the precision and passion of a fellow scientist. The Sector 12 project must be why they brought you here. I've heard the deep core drilling is presenting some unusual challenges. Throckvar nodded, his expression growing serious. The crystalline formations in this planet's core are unlike anything in our databases. The standard extraction methods are proving ineffective, and several drilling attempts have resulted in equipment failures and minor seismic disturbances. Your administrators contacted my government seeking assistance. As they continued talking, Sarah became aware that other beings in the corridor were staring at them. Some appeared shocked that she was having a normal conversation with the Gorvani warrior. Others looked terrified, as if they expected Throckvar to suddenly attack her. A few seemed angry, as if she was betraying her own species by showing kindness to someone they considered a monster. Would you like me to show you to your quarters? Sarah offered. I can give you a tour of the research facilities as well if you're interested. Throckvar hesitated, and for a moment she saw something vulnerable in his expression. You would do this? Even though others will judge you for associating with me? Sarah glanced around at the various aliens watching them, then looked back at Throckvar with determination. Let them judge. I became a xenobiologist because I believe that understanding and cooperation between species is more important than fear and prejudice. Besides, she added with a small smile, I have a feeling we could learn a lot from each other. As they walked through the station together, Sarah noticed how Throckvar moved with surprising grace despite his size. He was careful not to bump into anything, and he kept his voice low to avoid startling other beings. When they passed a group of young Selenite students on a field trip, he actually stepped aside and pressed himself against the wall to give them more room, even though they squeaked in terror and huddled together. Does it bother you? Sarah asked quietly. The way they react to you? Throckvar was silent for several steps before answering. It is. Lonely, he admitted. I have traveled to 47 different worlds in my career, and everywhere I go the reaction is the same. Fear, hatred, suspicion. I complete my work and leave as quickly as possible, because staying longer only makes things worse for everyone involved. Sarah felt a pang of sympathy. She couldn't imagine what it must be like to live in such complete isolation, to be judged and feared wherever you went, based solely on your appearance and species. It doesn't have to be that way here, she said firmly, at least not with everyone. When they reached Throckvar's assigned quarters, Sarah was surprised to see that the room was much larger than the standard accommodations. They gave you the VIP suite, she observed. Throckvar's laugh was a low rumble that shook the walls slightly. I believe they wanted to ensure I would be as far as possible from the other residents. These quarters are in the most isolated section of the station. Sarah looked around the spacious but lonely room and made another impulsive decision. Would you like to join me for dinner tonight? I usually eat in the main cafeteria around 1900 hours. The food is decent, and I could introduce you to some of the other researchers. The hope that flickered in Throckvar's four eyes was quickly replaced by concern. Dr. Chen, I appreciate your kindness, but I do not wish to cause problems for you. If others see you befriending me, they may treat you with suspicion as well. Sarah straightened her shoulders and looked up at the towering alien with determination. Then that's their loss. I make my own decisions about who I choose to spend time with, and I choose to spend time with people who are intelligent, professional, and kind. From what I've seen so far, you qualify on all counts. For the second time that day, Throckvar smiled that terrifying, tooth-filled smile, but Sarah was beginning to see past the fangs to the genuine warmth behind the expression. Then I would be honored to join you for dinner. Dr. Chen. It has been many years since anyone extended such an invitation to me. As Sarah left Throckvar to settle into his quarters, she felt a strange excitement building in her chest. She had the distinct feeling that this friendship was going to change both of their lives in ways neither of them could yet imagine. When Sarah entered the main cafeteria at 1900 hours, she immediately spotted Throckvar sitting alone at a table in the far corner. The massive Gorvani warrior had somehow managed to squeeze himself into one of the standard chairs, though it creaked ominously under his weight. Every other table in his vicinity was conspicuously empty, creating an invisible barrier of fear around him. Sarah grabbed her dinner tray and walked directly to his table, ignoring the shocked whispers and stares that followed her movement across the room. As she sat down across from Throckvar, she could feel the weight of dozens of eyes watching their every interaction. "How was your first day?" she asked, pretending not to notice the way conversations at nearby tables had dropped to nervous murmurs. Thrakvar looked up from his meal, which appeared to be some sort of synthesized protein that had been enlarged to accommodate his size. "Productive, though challenging. I spent the afternoon reviewing the geological surveys from the failed drilling attempts. The crystalline formations in Sector 12 are indeed unusual. They seem to resonate at specific frequencies that interfere with standard extraction equipment." Sarah found herself genuinely interested, despite the hostile atmosphere surrounding them. "Resonate? Like they're alive?" "Not alive, but perhaps more dynamic than your scientists initially believed. On my homeworld, we call such formations singing stones. They require a delicate touch and precise harmonic calibration to extract safely. Too much force or the wrong frequency can cause them to shatter, potentially triggering seismic events." As they talked, Sarah became aware that Dr. Webb had approached their table. Her supervisor stood behind her chair, his expression a mixture of concern and disapproval. "Sarah, could I speak with you privately for a moment?" Sarah looked up at him with raised eyebrows. "Anything you need to say to me, you can say in front of Thrakvar. He's a colleague, and he's working on our most important project." Dr. Webb shifted uncomfortably, clearly reluctant to speak in front of the Gorvani warrior. "Sarah, I understand your commitment to cross-species cooperation, but perhaps you should be more cautious about your associations. There are concerns about how this might affect your standing with the research team." Thrakvar started to rise from his chair, probably intending to excuse himself and spare Sarah the confrontation. But Sarah placed her hand on his massive arm, stopping him. The gesture sent a ripple of gasps through the nearby tables. "Marcus, my associations are my own business," Sarah said firmly. "And frankly, I'm disappointed that you would judge someone based on species prejudice rather than professional qualifications. Thrakvar is here because he's the best mining consultant available for this type of work. Maybe instead of worrying about my standing, you should be focused on learning from his expertise." Dr. Webb's face flushed red. "Sarah, I'm trying to look out for your career. Some of the other department heads are already asking questions about your judgment." "Then maybe those department heads should examine their own prejudices," Sarah replied coldly. "Now, if you'll excuse us, Thrakvar was explaining some fascinating insights about resonant crystalline formations." After Dr. Webb retreated, looking both angry and embarrassed, Sarah turned back to Thrakvar. She was surprised to see that his 4 eyes were studying her with something approaching awe. "You defended me," he said quietly. "Even when it could damage your career, you defended me against your own supervisor." Sarah shrugged, though she was still angry about the confrontation. "I defend what's right, and right now, what's right is treating you with the same respect we'd show any other qualified professional." Thrakvar leaned forward slightly, his voice dropping to a whisper. "Dr. Chen, you must understand. My reputation is not entirely undeserved. My people have been involved in many conflicts throughout galactic history. We have conquered worlds, enslaved populations, and shown little mercy to those who opposed us. The fear others show is based on real history." Sarah considered this carefully. "But you're not your people's history, are you? You're an individual who chose to become a mining engineer instead of a conqueror. You're someone who steps around maintenance robots and waits patiently while nervous guards do their jobs. Your species' past doesn't define who you are as a person." "Few beings make such distinctions," Thrakvar replied. "Most see the horns, the fangs, the claws, and they see only a monster. They do not see the years I spent studying geology, the mining disasters I have prevented, or the lives I have saved through my work." Their conversation was interrupted by a commotion at the cafeteria entrance. A group of Chitauri warriors had entered, their insectoid features twisted with obvious hostility. The lead Chitauri, whose mandibles clicked menacingly as he moved, headed straight for their table. "Human," the Chitauri warrior hissed at Sarah. "You dishonor yourself by sharing food with this destroyer. The Gorvani are enemies of all civilized species. They destroyed my clan's homeworld 3 centuries ago." Thrakvar tensed, his massive hands clenching into fists on the table. For a moment, Sarah caught a glimpse of the warrior that others feared, the predator hidden beneath the gentle engineer's exterior. But then he took a deep breath and forced himself to relax. "I am sorry for your clan's loss," Thrakvar said formally. "The actions of my ancestors bring me no pride. I cannot undo the past, but I can choose to be better than those who came before me." The Chitauri's compound eyes glittered with rage. Pretty words from a monster. But words cannot resurrect the dead or rebuild destroyed worlds. Sarah stood up slowly, placing herself between the angry Chitauri and Thrakvar. She was tiny compared to both warriors, but her voice carried absolute authority. You're absolutely right that words can't change the past, but neither can perpetuating cycles of hatred and revenge. Thrakvar wasn't alive when your homeworld was destroyed. He's here to do a job, and he's doing it well. If you have a problem with that, take it up with station administration. The Chitauri warrior studied her for a long moment, his mandibles clicking in agitation. You are either very brave or very foolish, human. Perhaps both. Probably both, Sarah admitted. But I'd rather be foolish and fair than smart and prejudiced. After the Chitauri group left, still muttering threats and insults, Sarah sat back down. Her hands were shaking slightly from the adrenaline, but she felt oddly proud of herself for standing up to the intimidating warriors. You continue to surprise me, Dr. Chen, Thrakvar said softly. I have never met a being like you. Most creatures either flee from me in terror or challenge me to combat. But you see something in me that others do not. Sarah smiled at him. I see a brilliant engineer who's been judged unfairly his entire life. I see someone who chose knowledge over violence, creation over destruction. And I see a friend. The word friend seemed to hit Thrakvar like a physical blow. His four eyes widened, and for several seconds he seemed unable to speak. When he finally found his voice, it was thick with emotion. Friend, he repeated as if testing the word. I had forgotten what that word meant. It has been so long since anyone called me that. Sarah reached across the table and touched his massive hand again, ignoring the fresh round of gasps from the other diners. Well, you'd better get used to it, because I have a feeling this friendship is going to be very important. For both of us. As they finished their dinner together, Sarah noticed that the atmosphere in the cafeteria had shifted slightly. While most beings were still avoiding their area, she caught a few curious glances instead of purely fearful ones. Perhaps witnessing her calm interaction with Thrakvar was making some of them question their assumptions. It was a small start, but it was a start nonetheless. 3 days later, alarms began blaring throughout Epsilon 7 in the early morning hours. Sarah woke to the sound of emergency broadcasts echoing through the corridors, announcing a critical situation in Sector 12. She dressed quickly and rushed to the command center, where she found chaos and panic among the station's senior staff. Dr. Webb stood before a massive holographic display showing the deep core mining site. Red warning indicators flashed across the screen, and seismic readings showed dangerous instability in the crystalline formations. The automated drilling equipment malfunctioned during the night shift, he explained to the assembled department heads. Instead of the careful harmonic extraction we planned, it went straight to maximum force. The singing stones are resonating out of control. Commander Torres, the station's military leader, pointed to the seismic readings. At this rate, we're looking at a cascade failure. If those formations collapse completely, the resulting earthquake could destroy the entire mining complex and possibly damage the station itself. Sarah studied the data, remembering her conversations with Thrakvar about the delicate nature of the crystalline formations. Where's Thrakvar? He warned us about exactly this kind of situation. Dr. Webb's expression darkened. He's already down there. Against direct orders, he took a transport to the mining site 20 minutes ago. Security tried to stop him, but he gestured helplessly. Have you ever tried to stop a 12-foot-tall warrior when he's determined to go somewhere? Sarah felt her heart skip a beat. He went down there alone? Into an unstable mining site? Commander Torres nodded grimly. The area is too dangerous for a full rescue team. The seismic activity could trigger tunnel collapses at any moment. We've lost contact with him since he entered the main shaft. Without thinking, Sarah headed for the exit. I'm going after him. Absolutely not, Dr. Webb said firmly. Sarah, I forbid it. The risk is too great. But Sarah was already at the door, her jaw set with determination. He's down there risking his life to save the mining operation and possibly the entire station. I'm not going to abandon him just because he's the only one brave enough to try fixing this mess. Commander Torres stepped forward. Dr. Chen, I can't authorize a rescue mission. The tunnels are unstable and we can't risk losing more personnel. Then don't authorize it, Sarah replied. I'm going as a private citizen making my own choices. Thrakvar is my friend and friends don't abandon each other. 30 minutes later, Sarah was descending into the mining complex in a small emergency transport. She had grabbed whatever safety equipment she could find, but she knew she was woefully unprepared for the dangerous conditions below. The transport shook violently as minor earthquakes rippled through the planet's crust, and several times she had to grip her seat to avoid being thrown around the cabin. When she reached the main mining level, the sight that greeted her was terrifying. Cracks ran along the tunnel walls, and strange harmonic vibrations filled the air with an eerie musical sound. Emergency lighting cast strange shadows that seemed to dance with the seismic tremors. But worst of all was the complete silence on her communicator. No response from Thrakvar despite repeated attempts to contact him. Sarah made her way carefully through the damaged tunnels, following the route toward the deep core drilling site. The singing stones were definitely out of control, their resonant frequencies creating a symphony of destruction that she could feel in her bones. Loose rocks fell from the ceiling with increasing frequency, and several times she had to dodge falling debris. She found Thrakvar deep in the heart of the mining complex, standing before a massive crystalline formation that pulsed with chaotic energy. The Gorvani warrior was connected to some sort of harmonic calibration device, his massive hands moving with surprising delicacy across a complex control interface. Sweat streamed down his face, and all four of his eyes were focused with intense concentration on his work. "Thrakvar," Sarah called out over the noise of the unstable crystals. "What are you doing?" He looked up, and his expression shifted from surprise to alarm when he saw her. "Dr. Chen, you should not be here. The formations are on the verge of complete collapse. If I cannot stabilize them in the next few minutes, the cascade failure will be irreversible." Sarah moved closer, studying the readings on his equipment. "Tell me what you need." "How can I help?" "You cannot help with this," Thrakvar said firmly. "The harmonic calibration requires precise manipulation of frequencies that only my people understand. You must leave immediately before—" His words were cut off by a massive tremor that sent both of them stumbling. A large section of the tunnel ceiling collapsed just meters away, blocking their escape route. Sarah realized with growing horror that they were now trapped in the most dangerous part of the mining complex. "The exit is blocked," she said, fighting to keep her voice calm. "Looks like we're in this together now." Thrakvar stared at the blocked tunnel, then looked back at her with an expression of profound guilt. "I am sorry, Dr. Chen. I came here alone precisely to avoid putting others at risk. Now, because of my failure, you will likely die alongside me." Sarah stepped closer to him, placing her hand on his arm. "You didn't fail at anything. You're here trying to save everyone on this station, including people who have treated you with nothing but fear and hatred. That's not failure, that's heroism." "Heroism that may accomplish nothing," Thrakvar replied bitterly. "The resonant frequencies are too chaotic. I can stabilize small sections at a time, but the moment I focus on one area, another begins to collapse. I need to be able to calibrate multiple harmonic fields simultaneously, but I only have 2 hands." Sarah studied his equipment more carefully. "What if you had 4 hands? Could you stabilize it then?" Thrakvar's 4 eyes focused on her with sudden interest. "Perhaps, but that is impossible. The calibration requires an understanding of Gorvani harmonic theory that takes decades to master." "Then teach me," Sarah said firmly. "Right now, I'm a quick learner and we don't have any other choice." For a moment, Thrakvar seemed stunned by her suggestion. "Dr. Chen, the risk. If you make a mistake, you could trigger an immediate collapse that would kill us both instantly." Sarah looked around at the cracking walls and unstable formations, then back at her friend. "As opposed to the slow collapse that's going to kill us both anyway? I'd rather die trying to help than standing around doing nothing." Thrakvar studied her face for a long moment, then slowly began to explain the complex harmonic principles behind crystal stabilization. His voice was calm and methodical despite their desperate situation, walking her through the basic frequency relationships and the delicate balance required to calm the singing stones. Sarah listened with fierce concentration, asking clarifying questions and practicing the hand movements on inactive controls. The tunnel continued to shake around them, and she could see the stress in Thrakvar's expression as he divided his attention between teaching her and maintaining the minimal stabilization he had achieved. "Remember," he said as he guided her hands to a secondary control panel, "the crystals respond to intention as much as frequency. They can sense fear and aggression. You must approach them with respect and calm, as you would approach any living being." Sarah nodded, taking a deep breath to center herself. As she placed her hands on the controls and began to feel the strange harmonic feedback from the crystalline formations, she realized that this moment would define not just their survival, but the future of human-Gorvani relations. If they succeeded, it would be because a human and a Gorvani had worked together as equals, combining their knowledge and trust to achieve the impossible. If they failed, at least they would fail together, as friends. Working together in the unstable tunnel, Sarah and Thrakvar began the delicate process of harmonically stabilizing the chaotic crystalline formations. Sarah's hands trembled at first as she tried to match the complex frequency patterns Thrakvar was demonstrating, but gradually she began to feel the rhythm and flow of the harmonic fields. The singing stones responded to her touch with surprising sensitivity. As she learned to modulate the frequencies with gentle precision rather than force, she could feel the crystals beginning to calm under her influence. It was unlike anything she had ever experienced, almost as if she was communicating with the formations through pure vibration and intention. Excellent. Thrakvar rumbled approvingly as he watched her progress. You have natural talent for this work. Feel how the crystals guide your hands toward the frequencies they need. Do not fight them. Work with them. For nearly 2 hours they labored together in the increasingly unstable tunnel. Sweat poured down both their faces as they maintained the delicate balance required to prevent total collapse. Sarah's arms ached from the precise hand movements, and her mind was exhausted from the intense concentration required to feel and respond to the subtle harmonic feedback. But slowly, gradually, the chaotic resonance began to settle into more stable patterns. The violent tremors that had shaken the tunnel walls reduced to minor vibrations, and the eerie wailing of the crystals softened to a more pleasant harmonic hum. Most importantly, the seismic readings on their monitors showed that the cascade failure was being successfully prevented. We did it, Sarah gasped, as the last unstable formation settled into a calm, steady resonance. The crystals are stable. Thrakvar stepped back from his controls, his massive frame swaying with exhaustion. Not just stable, perfectly balanced. Dr. Chen, what you have accomplished here is remarkable. You have learned in 2 hours what most of my people require months of training to master. Sarah slumped against the tunnel wall, suddenly aware of how tired and terrified she was. The adrenaline that had carried her through the crisis was fading, leaving her shaky and emotional. I couldn't have done any of it without you teaching me. We made a good team. More than good, Thrakvar replied softly. Dr. Chen, you risked your life to help me when no one else would. You trusted me enough to let me teach you dangerous techniques, and you succeeded at something that should have been impossible for a non-Gorvani. I will never forget this. Their moment of triumph was interrupted by the sound of voices and equipment echoing through the tunnels. A rescue team had finally managed to clear the blocked passage and was making its way toward them. Within minutes, Commander Torres and a squad of emergency workers appeared at their location. Dr. Chen. Thrakvar, the commander called out. Are you both injured? The seismic readings have stabilized, but we need to get you out of here immediately. As they were helped back through the tunnels toward the surface, Sarah noticed that the rescue team was treating Thrakvar very differently than before. Instead of the usual fear and suspicion, the emergency workers showed genuine respect and gratitude. Word had apparently spread throughout the station about what the Gorvani warrior had risked to save them all. When they emerged from the mining complex, they found a crowd waiting for them at the surface. Dozens of station personnel had gathered to see the two beings who had prevented a catastrophic collapse. The reception was unlike anything Sarah had expected. Dr. Webb pushed forward through the crowd, his expression a mixture of relief and amazement. Sarah, what you two accomplished down there. The engineering teams are calling it impossible. The harmonic stabilization you achieved is more precise than anything our automated systems could have managed. But it was Commander Torres who surprised Sarah the most. The tough military leader approached Thrakvar directly, looking up at the massive alien with obvious respect. Thrakvar, I owe you an apology. When you first arrived, I saw only a potential security threat. I failed to recognize that we had been sent one of the galaxy's finest mining engineers. Your actions today saved not just the mining operation, but possibly hundreds of lives. Thrakvar's 4 eyes blinked in surprise at the formal apology. I did only what was necessary, Commander. This station has shown me more kindness than I expected. I could not allow harm to come to it if I had the power to prevent such harm. More surprising still were the other aliens who approached to thank them. Several Chitauri warriors, including the one who had confronted them in the cafeteria, stepped forward with formal gestures of respect. Even some of the Vorthak crystalloids, who had previously avoided Throkvar entirely, came to express their gratitude. "I misjudged you, Gorvani," the lead Chitauri warrior admitted stiffly. "Your actions today show honor. My clan was wrong to judge you by the crimes of your ancestors." Sarah watched the interactions with growing amazement. In the space of a single crisis, Throkvar had gone from being the most feared and isolated being on the station to being recognized as a hero. But more than that, she could see that the way other aliens looked at her had changed as well. By standing with Throkvar and working alongside him as an equal, she had somehow earned a new kind of respect. Dr. Webb approached her as the crowd began to disperse. "Sarah, I owe you an apology as well. Your judgment about Throkvar was correct from the beginning. I let prejudice cloud my scientific objectivity, and I nearly prevented you from building what may be the most important interspecies friendship in this sector." Sarah smiled tiredly. "We all have our prejudices, Marcus. The important thing is being willing to overcome them when we encounter evidence that we're wrong." As the excitement died down and the station began returning to normal operations, Sarah found herself walking with Throkvar back toward the residential areas. The Gorvani warrior seemed deep in thought, his usual calm demeanor touched with something that looked almost like wonder. "Dr. Chen," he said finally, "what happened today changes everything for me. For the first time in my adult life, I feel like I belong somewhere, not as a feared outsider who is tolerated for his skills, but as a valued member of a community." Sarah looked up at her massive friend and smiled. "You always belonged here, Throkvar. It just took everyone else a while to realize it." "No," he replied thoughtfully. "It took someone brave enough to see past my appearance and species to show them who I really was. Without your friendship, your willingness to defend me and work alongside me, none of this would have been possible." As they walked together through corridors where aliens no longer fled from Throkvar's presence, Sarah realized that something fundamental had shifted on Epsilon 7. The crisis in the mines had done more than save the station. It had proven that cooperation and understanding between species could overcome even the deepest prejudices and fears. But she also knew that this was only the beginning. The real test would be whether these new relationships could survive the everyday challenges of living and working together, without the dramatic catalyst of a life-threatening crisis to force cooperation. 6 months after the mining crisis, Epsilon 7 had transformed into something unprecedented in galactic history. A truly integrated multi-species community where cooperation had replaced fear and suspicion. The changes were visible everywhere, from the mixed groups dining together in the cafeteria to the collaborative research projects that now included members from dozens of different species. Sarah stood in the station's new interspecies cultural center, watching Throkvar demonstrate traditional Gorvani stone-singing techniques to a fascinated audience of young researchers. His massive hands moved with delicate precision as he coaxed haunting melodies from crystalline formations, showing how his people used harmonic resonance not just for mining, but as an art form. The audience included beings from species that had once fled in terror from Throkvar's presence. Now they leaned forward eagerly, asking questions about Gorvani culture and history with genuine curiosity and respect. The transformation had been gradual but profound, spreading from the initial crisis through countless small interactions and shared experiences. Dr. Webb approached Sarah as the demonstration concluded. "The quarterly reports from the Galactic Council just came in," he said, holding up his tablet with obvious excitement. "Epsilon 7 has been selected as the model station for interspecies cooperation. We're receiving delegations from 12 different worlds who want to study our integration methods." Sarah smiled, watching as several Chitauri warriors helped Throkvar carefully pack away the delicate crystalline instruments. "It's amazing what can happen when people actually get to know each other instead of just fearing what they don't understand. The Council is particularly interested in the human-Gorvani partnership," Dr. Webb continued. "Apparently, successful cooperation between our species was considered virtually impossible before what happened here. They're calling it the Epsilon 7 Protocol, and want to implement similar programs throughout the galaxy." The success had brought unexpected opportunities for both Sarah and Throkvar. Sarah had been offered positions at the most prestigious xenobiological research institutes in the galaxy, while Thrakvar had received invitations to consult on mining projects throughout the Outer Rim territories. But both had chosen to remain on Epsilon 7, recognizing that their work here was far from finished. More importantly, they had discovered that their friendship had opened doors for other unlikely partnerships throughout the station. The Selenite engineers had begun working closely with the Chitauri warriors on security protocols, combining grace and precision with strength and tactical knowledge. The Vorthak crystalloids had partnered with human researchers to develop new communication technologies. Even the most traditionally isolationist species had begun to open up and participate in the growing community. "There's something else," Dr. Webb said, lowering his voice. "The Council wants to interview you both for a special documentary about interspecies cooperation. They want to understand how a single friendship managed to transform an entire station's culture." Sarah considered this, glancing over at Thrakvar as he patiently answered questions from a group of Selenite students. "I suppose it might help other stations avoid some of the problems we've seen, though I'm not sure we really understand ourselves how it all happened." "I think you understand better than you realize," Dr. Webb replied. "You saw an individual where others saw only a stereotype. You chose courage over comfort, friendship over fear, and most importantly, you never gave up believing that understanding was possible." Later that evening, Sarah and Thrakvar sat together in the observation lounge, watching the stars through the massive viewport. It had become their regular evening routine, a quiet time to discuss the day's events and plan for the future. The lounge was no longer empty around them. Instead, it buzzed with quiet conversations between beings who had learned to see past species differences to the individuals beneath. "Do you ever miss the solitude?" Sarah asked. "It must be strange going from complete isolation to being the center of attention." Thrakvar's 4 eyes reflected the starlight as he considered her question. "Sometimes," he admitted, "there are moments when I long for the simplicity of working alone, without the complexity of relationships and social expectations. But then I remember what it felt like to believe that I would spend my entire life feared and alone, and I realize that I would not trade this new life for anything." "The documentary team arrives next week," Sarah mentioned. "Are you ready to tell our story to the entire galaxy?" "Our story," Thrakvar repeated thoughtfully. "Not the story of the Gorvani warrior who found acceptance or the human scientist who overcame prejudice, but the story of 2 individuals who chose to see each other clearly." "Yes, I believe that is a story worth telling." Sarah nodded, watching a transport ship dock at the station's main port. Soon more beings would arrive at Epsilon 7, some carrying their own prejudices and fears, but they would find a community ready to welcome them, to show them that cooperation was not only possible, but mutually beneficial. "I've been thinking about what we want to say in the documentary," Sarah continued, "about what people can learn from what happened here. And what conclusions have you reached?" Sarah smiled, looking out at the endless expanse of stars. "That courage isn't about not being afraid, it's about choosing to do the right thing despite your fear. I was terrified when I first approached you. I had no idea how you would react, whether you would see me as a threat or an opportunity." "As was I," Thrakvar admitted. "When you spoke to me that first day, I thought perhaps you were simply naive or reckless. I never imagined that you were offering genuine friendship. But we both chose to take the risk," Sarah continued. "We chose to believe that understanding was possible, even when everything in our experience suggested otherwise. And that choice changed everything, not just for us, but for hundreds of other beings." Thrakvar reached out with one massive hand and gently touched Sarah's shoulder, a gesture that no longer drew stares or gasps from other beings in the lounge. "Dr. Chen, Sarah, you gave me something I thought was lost forever. You gave me hope that individuals can rise above the sins and prejudices of their species. You showed me that friendship is possible across any divide, if both parties are willing to see beyond surface appearances to the truth beneath." Sarah looked up at her towering friend, remembering the fear she had felt that first day when she decided to approach him. Now, 6 months later, she couldn't imagine her life without his friendship. The Gorvani warrior who had once seemed so alien and threatening had become one of the most important people in her life. "I think that's what we should tell them," she said finally, "that every individual has the choice to perpetuate old hatred and fear, or to risk everything on the possibility of understanding and friendship. and that when enough individuals make that brave choice, entire communities can change. As they sat together in comfortable companionship, watching the stars and the steady flow of beings who had come to Epsilon 7, seeking the same acceptance and cooperation they had found, Sarah reflected on how a single moment of courage had rippled outward to transform an entire corner of the galaxy. It had started with one human brave enough to befriend a giant alien warrior, but it had become something much larger, proof that hope, understanding, and genuine friendship could overcome even the deepest prejudices, one relationship at a time.